So now let's talk about exercise variation, how variety causes an important concept called muscle confusion, and what training variables there are that need to be manipulated in order to bring about proper muscular stimulation. First, I'd like to go over some key points from a recent study that I read by doctors Schoenfeld, Fisher, Gergich, Hahn, Helms, Phillips, Steele, and Vygotsky. And this study is titled Resistance Training Recommendations to Maximize Muscle Hypertrophy in an Athletic Population. And the first thing I want to go over is a direct quote from Dr. Brad Schoenfeld, which states that hypertrophy-oriented resistance training programs should include a variety of exercises that work muscles in different planes and angles of pull to ensure complete stimulation of the musculature. You see, variety is key to muscle growth because, as we found in the last class, if you do the same exact exercise in the same exact way, your body will adapt to it quickly and get good at doing just that one specific movement, and sooner or later the law of diminishing returns will kick in. So without variation, muscle hypertrophy is extremely limited, but with variety, it's almost limitless. Programming should employ a combination of multi and single joint exercises to maximize whole muscle development, which is another quote from that study. Okay, so take it from the scientific literature. Variation is key to hypertrophy. And one of the reasons why variety is such a key to hypertrophy is this concept called muscle confusion that you need to be familiar with. You see, your body will get used to doing things the same exact way over time. Once your body's used to doing something for a while, it becomes second nature and automated by the nervous system. All right, just how you don't have to think about walking up the stairs or like even driving your car, okay? Everything when done in repetition becomes automated by the nervous system. Okay, you perfect it, master, and then you hit a ceiling where you're no longer adapting and growing from it anymore because it's just a automatic process that your body no longer thinks is important enough to place any real focus on. Okay, it's just sort of a background process. So this is why the same exercises eventually become stale and ineffective. So while you do need fitness routines where you're doing the same things for a certain period of time, right, you also need novelty. You can't be doing them for too long. You can't just stick to the same program indefinitely. This brings me to the concept of what is called muscle confusion. Muscle confusion is how you negate all of that, which is done through novelty. Muscle confusion prevents your muscles from getting too used to any one type of movement so that it doesn't produce stimulus anymore. And through variety and constantly introducing novel stimuli to your muscles, it keeps your muscle from getting used to these things, keeps it confused, and thus keeps it always maximally stimulated throughout your training year. Understand? This way, because of the variety in the training, you never use the same routine for so long that it stops producing results. And this is significant to another principle, which is the principle of progressive overload, that you need more and more stimulus to continue building more and more muscle. But this variety also means more specific targeting because of your ability to use different types of equipment, different exercise techniques and tactics, such as using different equipment, different rep ranges, different exercise techniques and form, and using different angles, all right? Such as instead of just doing a bench press, doing a cable crossover press to try to work the inner chest more. This is how you create targeted and highly specific stimulus and muscle adaptations, as well as the most complete muscle development, because exercise variety recruits more motor units and makes the muscle do more work, thus causing more hypertrophy. But when I talk about variety, don't get me wrong, I do not mean having to do every possible type of training method at the same time, all in the same program or routine. Variety means periodizing or scheduling in phases different training styles and methods, types of exercises and routines, rep ranges, and such in different periods or phases throughout the year, so that you're switching it up basically on a seasonal basis. But you shouldn't be doing this in too short or too long of a time. So you need to follow the same routine for about 3 months or more in order to benefit from it at its full potential, because your body does take time to fully master a skill, which this is. It's a skill set you're trying to develop, right? So you do need to give every routine or program at least 3 months. Anything less than 3 months just isn't enough to achieve the full growth potential from. And you can even follow the same routine for up to about 6 months or more. But when you start to approach the year mark with a routine, that's when you're definitely going to see that law of diminishing returns kicking in. You should be changing up your routine much more frequently than that, okay, like closer to the 6-month mark. Now you might be wondering how much variety in muscle confusion is enough. You know, how many different things do I have to do? Well, not that much, all right? Once you've created enough muscle confusion through doing multiple different things at once, and you are changing up your routine completely every 3 to 6 months or so, you are probably getting enough variety in muscle confusion and don't have to worry about continuing to add more and more and more. In fact, you don't want to create so much muscle confusion that your muscles never get used to doing the same exercises and never know what they're doing, and everything is always different, okay? You do need to give your muscles things that they can get used to over short periods of time and really perfect and master the form and technique of in order to achieve your full potential gains from those exercises. So you don't want to overwhelm your muscles with too much variety, and you also don't want to change exercises prematurely when they're already still working. What you need to do is create a program that has a substantial amount of variety by using a mix of exercises for each muscle. And then do that routine for a while, all right? And after you've seen some good results from it and feel as though it's starting to get stale, change out some of the exercises you're getting tired of and introduce some more novel ones. The ideal is to do one program for about 3 to 6 months until you peak your performance with that one form of training. This can be done for longer than 6 months, maybe even the better part of the year in some circumstances, but usually you won't want to even go on for that long, and about 6 months will be enough. But now I know what a lot of you are probably wondering: what are the different forms of variety or training variables that we can be utilizing for novelty and muscle confusion? So now I'm going to teach you some things that I learned from Dr. Mike Israetel in Renaissance Periodization. And to quote Dr. Israetel, training variables must periodically change to mitigate staleness and continue to promote the best possible rates of long-term gains. This includes, but is not limited to, changes in one or more of the following: training volume, intensity or weight, frequency, exercise selection, exercise technique or style, the technical focus, and other tactics. You can do all of these things in many different ways in a training year with systematized training schedules, which is what periodization and programming are about. However, as I previously stated, the variation principle can also be overdone. Too much variation causes too much muscle confusion, as it is more than the muscle can adapt to. You need to allow the muscles to get used to a stimulus for a time before changing it. So what does this all mean for program design? Well, variation and specificity come at a trade-off to each other. Once you start integrating more and more variety into your workout, just for variety's sake, you're actually going to be diluting the specificity. Understand? And specificity is more important than variety, okay? You should always prioritize what is most specific to your goals. So any variation and variety you introduce should be adhering to that principle of specificity. It should be specific to your goals. So for instance, while all-around athleticism is very important to me, and I like doing a lot of different exercises for that so that I can be most athletic, the reasons why I want to be athletic are to get more muscular and to be able to play the sports that I like to play very well. So even though I may love doing a lot of different athletic exercises, I'm not going to start doing the types of running drills that a soccer player would do, all right? Or I'm not going to start trying to push a sled like a football player does practicing for football practice, because that variety would be superfluous to me, okay? It is just not in line with the specificity that I'm training for. And there may be times I see an athlete at the gym doing something and I may think it looks cool and may think to myself, wow, how awesome it would be to be able to do that. But guess what? They are a soccer player or a football player training for that specific thing. It's got no use to me, okay? So I'm not going to just start doing that thing just because I think it would be fun or cool or would be good for the sake of variety, because it's not in alignment with the specificity that I need for reaching my goals. So your variation should always be within the bounds of specificity to your goals and sport. So runners and endurance athletes should not be doing strength training exercises for their legs, even though their legs are what they are using for their sport. Also, as we've discussed, varying too often is not a good idea either. And one of the main reasons for this that I didn't explain earlier is because it interferes with overload and directed adaptation. So in order to achieve a large physical athletic goal, you need to be doing a certain type of progressive overloading training for a certain period of time in order to reach that goal. So if my goal is to bench press 250 or 300 pounds, well, I need to practice bench pressing until I get there, right? I cannot stop bench pressing and do other things just for the sake of variety. But that doesn't mean that I'm only going to be doing heavy barbell bench presses. There should be other training variables that you manipulate to develop your chest and that skill of bench pressing heavy. But these variables should be periodized into blocks or cycles where you methodically and systematically switch gears from block to block, but in a way that transfers your training from one thing to the next. So there's other forms of bench pressing that will be conditioning you to get ready and prepped to do heavy bench pressing. And you can progressively overload yourself on the bench press while switching up certain chest training variables block by block in order to get there. And that is the sort of thing I'm going to be teaching you how to do in the phase potentiation part of this course, so you can look forward to that. But lastly, the big rule of thumb that I want you to take away from this on variety and muscle confusion is that variance must adhere to all other exercise principles. All right, you cannot just be doing things because they seem fancy or advanced. All right, don't be random and superfluously complicated like the people you see on Instagram who are just showing off and posting because they need to post daily content in order to stay relevant on social media. All right, so what we've seen these days is this huge epidemic of these so-called fitness influencers who are putting out daily videos of them doing things that are just meant to be eye-catching and to garner views because they look spectacular or sensational, right? But that doesn't make them practically good exercises that you ought to be doing. So make sure that as you introduce variety and manipulate training variables, you're sticking with the basic movement patterns that you are trying to train, such as pushing, pulling, and squatting. And any variants that you introduce need to adhere to all of the other training principles and the methodology that you are using to train with. Like I said, if you're a runner and you're training for endurance, you don't need to do strength training just for the sake of variety. It's important to train smarter, not harder.